We're live.
We're live. Well, welcome everyone, and this is our 2021-2031 long-term plan submission day. So this plan signals a much-needed change of direction and operational pace for the Otago Regional Council. We've signalled our intention to correctly resource the Otago Regional Council to catch up and tackle the environmental challenges that we all face. We can only tackle so much at one time, and you'll see that some of our issues we will be ramped up in later years. So not everything's going to happen at once, because physically we won't be able to do that, but we're doing our best. We need action now. So this is our public submission process, and this process is critical to ensure that we are really in tune with what Otago wants and that we're on the right track. We absolutely appreciate all our submitters for putting submissions in, and we really appreciate those, again, the submitters that will turn up here today and to Queenstown and Zoom in for their contribution. But the written ones are equally as important to us, and we just thank you very much. So today we've got a very full timetable, and we'll take the approach where everyone has been sent an email or made contact that we'll have 4 minutes at the 4-minute time. We'll have a bell that will be dinged to make sure everyone realises that the 5 minutes is about up. Then we'll have question time after that. So that will give us approximately a 10-minute window for the councillors to ask any questions that are about. For groups and organisations, we'll give you a bell at about 7 minutes, and that will allow you to go to 8 minutes, so we can then have question time as well. So because we feel this is a real opportunity for councillors to get those questions in for clarity around submissions. Let's get underway. So first submitter for the day is Mr. Lloyd McCall and Craig Simpson. Thanks very much for coming.
Kore hei te manu, takiri mai te ara, ka aotea. Te kere te Māori o te wai, ka taia tātou te mahi, mamahaetea te ingoa, ko tapo anuku tōku manga i tu rā, ko pomahaka te awa, i rere rā, ko autako kei ti taia ruru tōku turanga waiwai, no wai koi ahau, ko Lloyd rawa ko Craig tōku ingoa, no reiwa, ngā mihi nui, ka pai te rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. It's a new day, the birds singing, it's a new day, the dawn's broken, and let's start the new world. Thank you very much for having us here today. We've got our submission. We'd like to probably go through it quite quickly. It's sort of based on mine, and we had a wee bit of trouble getting our time slots, but I just want to go through it quite quickly so there's plenty of time for questions. Do you mind if I sit down?
Absolutely.
So first of all, the first thing, we'll get it out of the road. The opening statement basically is I think we're all here to make decisions that will enhance our environment and while we maintain our economy. And we have to be really careful that when we're making decisions that we're not making decisions around self-imposed and external regulations with unrealistic timeframes. I just think that's where my first opening line is, because I think it's really important that everybody's involved in the decision-making process going forward, and we're not getting time-bound to unrealistic timeframes, because that creates poor decision-making. As far as the long-term plan environments, I was just going to whip through them quite quickly. The pest management proposal, my theory is get it done as a problem only magnified. You've got to go in there and go hard and get the job done now. Balancing the budget, probably the thought, I'm very much in tune with where your guys thinking of how you're going to balance your budget. I think the time is right to step up the rating expectations. I think we may have been underfunded in the past. I think the funds it needs to be funded widely, so from rates basically. That's actually in the wrong place. The Lake Hayes one. The Lake Hayes, once again, go hard and go now. It's a problem that's not going to go away. But probably with that one, I just want to say I think your funding model for that one, I probably see it a little bit differently, because when you're looking at when you're looking at the cleaning up jobs of an area that's been degraded, you've got to be careful. If you just rate the people that are in the close proximity, they're not always the cause of the degrade, and they don't always get the benefit of cleaning it up either. So basically my theory is, my theory is that over time, everybody's been encouraged to do development, be it farm development or urban development, and we've been incentivised to do it. And now all of a sudden we've got to the stage where we've created an issue. So I think the whole community that was involved in the initial development should do it. So I think the model for funding Lake Hayes should be 50% the Queenstown Lakes District Council and 50% the wider Otago area, because I think it's everybody's problem.
Yep.
Okay. I'd also want to throw my head in behind the Lake Hayes Trust Water Care Group, and their endeavours in this area. A community-led project's always going to have the most success. The environments, very much agree with. I found when I was reading through the book, there wasn't a lot of detail. There were some big numbers like the millions for the environment, but there wasn't a lot of detail broken down. I did manage to find some a couple of nights ago, but just quickly, integrated management plans. Yes, I think that's the way we need to go, and I think probably some of what I was reading, some of your time frames to get these things implemented maybe a wee bit lax. We probably could do them go a wee bit harder on that. Obviously, you'll know from myself and Craig that we're very much in favour of supporting the catchment group model. Environmental information, one of Lloyd's key ones here. We need real-time information, so it's no use collecting all this data and information about our environment if people never get to see it. And so, like, I've been waiting for over a month now just to get the latest up-to-date water tests in the Pomahaka for a series of meetings that we've already had, but we still would quite like to have that data at some stage. And it's just, there's no use having data if it's not available to the public, because it's public data. So you need to actually invest to get your infrastructure to be able to get that to the state whereby I can click in the computer and actually find it. Also, with around this the data type stuff, like Craig and I both ended up there with our submissions and couldn't work out how to get them to you. Just do it on the website, not that easy. There's no email, and so, in the end of the day, I just put mine in the comments section on the main page. Rural liaison support, to me, this is just a complete no-brainer. If you want to build trust and get engagement from the landowners, from the people, you need a strong, proactive farmer liaison team. You're not going to get farmer engagement and trust building consents and regulatory stuff. You've got to do it via a non-confrontational farmer liaison team, and I'm pretty sure every other regional council has quite significantly stronger teams than us. Probably the main ones that we're here for, consents for environmental good projects. I think at the end of the day, I think this is where we need to spend a little bit of time. The council has to recognise, the council has to pave a pathway for groups and individuals to be able to implement environmental good practices for the benefit of everybody in Otago. And right now there's too many roadblocks in the road of doing that from time to time. And I think one of the ones is around the consenting process and the fees. The council needs to have the management staff have to have the ability to be able to negotiate or waive fees. Right now it seems they're very limited in their ability to negotiate or waive fees, but for environmental goods, I think you as a council have to be able to give them the ability to waive fees for environmental good projects. And we also, the other thing that I've said is that 7 minutes?
It's 7 minutes.
So the other thing is, we got 20. The other thing is, with the consenting team, the whole district should be paying for the management and the infrastructure, because the consenting process is there to protect everybody. So the actual management and the department costs should be spread across the whole area, not just done on a fee, not just on recovery. River management is the last thing that we want to come through. We think there should be more permitted activities allowable in the plan, which will come through later on. The consent fees, the consent costs, I've done that.
River management.
River management, yeah, sorry. Basically, the river management budget is obviously inadequate, resulting in the multiplication issues. It's not realistic to keep underfunding the maintenance of the hydro corridors. So basically up in that area, and also there's a lot of gravel build-ups, continues to be an issue. I understand the OSC is looking at getting consents to manage the gravel, but action is required now to remove the stock of gravel before we get significantly compromising infrastructure and increasing sediment loadings. And we think the rules for the water plan when you're doing your revising your what do you call it? Regional water plan, we need to look at the rules that prohibit activities on the Pomahaka that's becoming restricted in our activities. So thank you very much, and I'd like to have some questions.
Boyd, any questions? Fine.
Well, hey, a big thank you to both of you for all the work that you do. I think that goes without saying. We'll probably take it for granted, though, to a certain degree, but a big thank you. This waiving of fees, it's something that we talk about, but we don't actually seem to be able to do. What type of budget would we require? Like, how many wetlands do you think potentially per year for this council? Like, is it a 50 grand thing? Is it a 100 grand thing? If each fee was potentially like 5 or 10, let's say 7, how many wetlands are we going to do? It would be a good target to make a difference in the target.
It's a really hard question, because I think currently, I know a lot of people have said to us, based on our experience, that they wouldn't be going near it, developing it. So
but, I'm talking about a different.
I understand that, but it's like hard to answer, because we've had the negative kind of feeling in the past.
So let's push that to the
So we've got, like, I know of about 3 right now that we would hit go if it wasn't for the consenting.
So what would be a good budget for this council to say we're going to put this budget aside, negotiate waiving consent fees for wetlands?
I'd be thinking the 50,000 sort of area.
50 grand. So it's not.
So we got another project that may or may not get off the ground pretty soon, which is going to involve 8 or 10 of these a year as part of the project, plus other stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, thank you.
But
Councillor
10
Wilson
would be 70 grand, based on 7 grand.
Thank you. I just want to talk about Lake Hayes, and we've got so many submissions about this all over the place. I just want to check that my thinking of what you're saying is that you'd rather it was polluter pays, or that we look at a model, and I may have misread your submission because there's been so many of them, that we look at a model where we just get X amount for water improvements or lake improvements and just start working through a list, and not worry so much about the rate generally for that, and not worry so much about the exacerbators, or have I?
I think what I'm basically saying is I think it should be rated from a wider than just the people that live right around Lake Hayes, because I don't believe the people that are living around Lake Hayes are the reason for the deterioration of Lake Hayes. So I think you need to take a wider view of how you fund the improvements of Lake Hayes. I'm not au fait with how you're going to improve it.
Yeah.
Although I have spoken with Brian Haff, some of them up there, but
Right.
So I think it needs to be, because if you have your rating base too narrow, you're not actually going to even catch where the pollution's because it's coming from above and around.
Sorry, I'm reading your last paragraph. I thought you meant that just do it generally and then.
So it's 50%.
Look at all hotspots.
Yeah,
that's fine.
You had one option, you just rated everybody.
Yeah.
I thought I was heading down that line, but I thought no, it should be part Central Otago and part everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Newt.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you both. My question is around your real-time water testing suggestion. Maybe it's more for Craig, but is the rest of the country there now with real-time testing rather than taking a test and finding out the results 2 or 3 days later? Where are we at? Are we behind the 8 ball?
I'm not 100% familiar, but I know in the Waikato River, for instance, they're setting up real-time monitoring sites, like I think dozens of them throughout the length of the river. So it is something that some regional councils are certainly investigating and investing in. Yeah.
So my problem, Andrew, is we can't get to your existing information, just your monthly state of environment information we've been trying to get it for a month.
Simple answer that our Aquarius program is being launched at the end of this month, and that as that is rolled out, that information I understand will be very, very quickly available. So we'll talk to you a wee bit later, Lloyd.
You may be interested in, we've got a pilot program going with people with satellites to try and measure water quality by satellites.
Councillor Calvert.
Is that better?
Yep.
Yeah. I am getting as a general theme from you that you like our interaction with rural liaison and with catchment groups and things, that the more the community around can talk to us, the better, and the more we get on, as it were. Do you think in that sense that the rating should follow that interaction? What I'm saying about that is, for instance, in Lake Hayes, if, as we are, suggesting that we might target rate people around Lake Hayes, would you then say, then those are the people we should be particularly liaising with about I'm just sort of trying to collect those thoughts together and see where you...
I think it's really important that you talk with your communities and before you make decisions as well. But the Lake Hayes one is an interesting one because it's such a dynamic area with your developments, lifestyle and urban. So I think if you're going to rate the people just around Lake Hayes and you're going to talk with them, at the end of the day, they're going to get a double whammy because they're the ones that are going to be doing all the volunteer hours and putting in all the work to actually improve their infrastructure on their properties. And then you're going to rate them double as well to do it. Whereas I think the cause of the pollution may not be quite that localised. The cause is, at the end of the day, we're encouraged to do all this development and stuff. So I believe you're rating your compensation or where you get money from has to come from a wider base than just the people that live on the land just around there.
And that you should listen to that wider base, particularly.
You need to listen to everybody. You need to listen to the ones that live on it, but you need to listen to the wider base as well because they're the ones that are involved. And there's people there that will know the lake better than the ones that live right beside it as well. Look, go to the old people.
Yeah, look, thank you very much. Thanks indeed, Mr. Well, I'm sure we'll be in touch to go through some of those points further. But our next submitter is online, set to go.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Very much appreciate it. Very much appreciate it.
Keep it up on behalf of all of us.
And and I did my remiss of me at the start that we have an apology from Councillor Kelleher and Councillor Hobbs, and of course in Queenstown we have Councillor Forbes, who will be soon joined by Councillor Laws.
Councillor Laws is zooming in.
He's zooming in now. Good. Good. Look, thank you, Councillor Laws.
I've been here all along.
Good to hear.
Unusual. It was so quiet. Thank you.
Well, ready for Brian Boyle.
And on Zoom now we have Mr. Brian Boyle. Thank you, Brian.
Says he's connected.
Hello. We've got you, Brian.
Do you want just to
So Brian, have you got us? Good morning. Good morning.
we hear him?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't hear anything from your end.
Oh, I'll message him.
It's been a problem for 15 years.
You said it.
At least,
Would you like me to start
at least we can hear.
I can't hear
Yes,
anything.
yes.
Thank you.
It seems a shame that I'm not able to respond to questions. Okay, well, first of all, apologies for this suboptimal communications, but councillors, thank you for giving me this opportunity to provide feedback on the ORC's long-term plan. I'm a retired astrophysicist and public servant, and I live on Speargrass Flat Road. My submission focuses on the strategy behind and the implementation of Proposal 3, the remediation of Lake Hayes. First, the approach of consigning the remediation of Lake Hayes to a separate programme gives the impression that the health of this water system is actually not part of ORC's core business. The ratings increase for the vast majority of Otago's ratepayers in all options under Proposal 3 is less than 3% of the general rates increase under Proposal 2. This begs the question of why isn't the remediation of this jewel of the Lakes region simply included as a priority under the core budget? This perception is exacerbated by the methodology for water quality measurement and reporting used by the ORC, which has consistently ignored the vast majority of the sediment and nutrient flow into the lake. This has led to misinformation being propagated to ratepayers that the lake health is improving. For example, by the ORC's Lakes in Transition sites around the lake, stating that the lake health is improving. My analysis of ORC's own data suggests that this is not the case, and that with an annual load of 1,760 tonnes of sediment and 2 tonnes of phosphorus arriving in the lake via Mill Creek in 2020, the lake is suffering from more pollution than ever. Second, having now accepted there's a problem, ORC's recommended way of funding the remediation is A, inconsistent with their own consultants' report, unfair and arbitrary in drawing the boundaries. Properties closer to the lake that enjoy better access only pay 1% of the increase compared to those further away with poorer access. Inefficient from a taxation viewpoint, ignoring the best practice principle of polluter pays. Indeed, drawing rating boundaries which place the heaviest polluters in a low rating increase zone, ORC are effectively advocating a polluter rewarded or polluted pays model. Finally, despite there being no economic benefit, the economic model used to derive the recommendation is predicated only on the upside benefit to users through remediation of the lake and ignores any downside loss suffered by those same users over the decades which the lake has suffered a decline in quality under ORC stewardship. This includes, of course, the use of biased data to give a false impression of lake health described above, and the practice of declaring non-notifiable development work, which includes the excavation and redirection of several hundred metres of Mill Creek, only 1 kilometre up from Lake Hayes. I submit that the most strategic and sustainable way for ORC to fund the remediation of the lake, which is welcome, and of course other degraded Otago water bodies in future, where less rich people supposedly might live, is to include this activity as a core part of its business and prioritise it for investment as part of the ratings increase applied uniformly and fairly across the ratepayers of Otago. As part of this investment, ORC should implement a comprehensive monitoring scheme which samples all conditions to provide an accurate and true estimate of how their actions and those of others will help to improve the lake health in future. These measurements should be included in a proper outcome-based framework, including, for example, a nutrient budget for the lake. Thank you. Of course, I can't hear any questions that you might have, at least via audio.
I think, Brian, I think they haven't unmuted the chamber, so probably hard for them to put. But I've got one for you. You can't hear me? I'm not muted. Okay.
Where's our speaker?
I don't know. Can you not hear me, Brian? Yeah, there's no mute button.
Tell them that we will ring him during a break with...
I can't.
We will ring him during the break with any questions from councillors.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Could you just send that through on chat box, okay. Alexa?
Having my chat to see whether or not there's any questions that you wish to send through.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. He just asked to look in chat.
Okay, I've got that. Yeah. Can you let me know when the break is?
10:30. Yeah.
10:30.
Thank you very much indeed.
Can you
I'm really sorry for this, but I'll be very happy to receive questions during the break. Thank you for your time.
we set? Well, moving on to our next submitter, which will be Kathleen O'Sullivan. Now. She's at page 46 of booklet 1.
She said hello.
You there, Kathleen?
Yes, I'm here.
Good, you've got us. So, Kathleen, we'll give a wee bell at 4 minutes, and then a second bell at 5 minutes, and then sort of 4 or 5 minutes to ask questions if required. Okay. So if you're ready, we're underway. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kathleen O'Sullivan. I live at Lake Hayes. I'm a long-term resident of the Pacific Basin. I would just like to say that I think that the options that were given for our submissions were too narrow, and I think they're too narrow because basically I think the options were all unfair to a certain extent. I think that RSC has ignored problems and failed in their duty, and as a result, the lake is polluted. And so all of the options, to a certain extent, are user pays, but the user is the victim in this situation because the lake has been polluted. Historically, despite the local community lobbying, RSC have failed to science that would allow it to understand the state of the lake. Can you still hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. It's back again.
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, you guys just went silent. Historically, RSC have failed to show up for consent hearings where pollution was going to occur in the lake as a result of the consents being granted. Just this week, there was consent RM 20071, where the commissioners declared as part of the decision for allowing a subdivision in the catchment, the fact that RSC hadn't bothered to submit on the consent. So it's still happening. RSC is failing in their duty. Okay. The second reason why it's unfair is because the community in Queenstown have already contributed a huge amount to lake restoration. Through Friends of Lake Hayes and the Mana Tahuna Trust, we've committed $10 million to funding lake restoration. The other concerns I have about the way the submission is framed is it doesn't explain how $3.5 million is going to be spent. There seems to be no clear plan. I know that all the science has indicated that all the work should be done in the catchment to get the greatest long-term generational results. And yet ORC doesn't seem to be involved in any work in restoring the catchment and land use practices to protect the waterways. Now, another reason why it's unfair is the geographical location of who pays what seems to be a little bit skewed. It takes just as long to drive from Lower Shotover as it does from Arrowtown to reach a reserve to have a picnic at Lake Hayes, and yet Arrowtown isn't included in the users. I'd also like to point out that most of the users, as I live by the lake and have for many years and know, most of the users aren't locals. Most of the users are tourists. And New Zealand gains from that tourism and the tax take. Now, I do believe that ORC have other funding options, given that this is the case. I think ORC should work harder to get their funding for the restoration of Lake Hayes from central government and maybe other funding sources, such as Ports of Otago's dividends, because ORC does have other funding options available, and it shouldn't all fall on the local residents. That's it, really. That's the main reasons why I think it's unfair, because we're already doing our bit in our community. the geography of who pays for what, the people that have gained from the land use practices seem to be missing as far as any options are concerned for paying any significant contribution towards lake restoration. Do you have any questions for me?
I do.
Yes.
Hi, it's Councillor Michael Laws here. How are you?
Hi, Michael.
I was really interested in the $10 million that you quoted as being the contribution that has already been made. You mentioned...
it hasn't been, it's been committed to by the community.
Can you give me a bit more detail about that?
Okay, so the Friends of Lake Hayes has spearheaded the catchment restoration, and it is estimated to cost upwards of $14 million in total over a long term. And the community has committed, and Friends of Lake Hayes as an organisation has committed to raising those funds with Mana Tahuna. A lot of grant applications have already been processed. I think that a lot of over $1 million from local money has already been deposited and has been spent in, as far as and used at the moment for consent applications for wetland restoration. 600,000 have been donated, I think, directly to ORC for the I think it's increasing the size of the culvert pipe for the exit at Lake Hayes. It's another local community contribution. It's 600,000 and upwards that ORC won't have to spend. It's money directly coming from the community. So as you can see, the community is already contributing.
Councillor Calvert.
I'm taking it from what you're saying that you believe that the degradation continues to happen.
Yes.
And are you then suggesting that we're not administering the consents process correctly, or that the consents and rules regime is not suitable to control further degradation?
No, I'm suggesting that you simply don't put submissions into consent applications where water quality is affected. You've simply been missing in action. I would urge you to read the Commissioner's decision that came out this week on RM 20071 as to why they granted the consent. And they specifically said that ORC didn't bother to put in a submission. It was their responsibility, and therefore they can only act on that. That's
but they granted consent on the rules, presumably. So do you think the rules are wrong?
Just Queenstown Lakes District.
As part of their decision, I can read it. Here we go, 101 from RM 20071.
Kathleen,
that Otago Regional Council has the function of managing land use for the purpose of maintaining and enhancing water quality, and the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management is focused on regional and processes. Policy 22.2.4.2 provides an integrated management plan where the Council can assist the Otago Regional Council to undertake and achieve its functions. We note that the Otago Regional Council was not a submitter on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Just quickly, firstly, you've got a damn tidy kitchen. Secondly, just because we don't submit, I mean, we still have a water plan, and we have done a plan change 8, which has particular settlement.
It has no meaning. And
it's still there, there's some accountability.
On their policy. There's been a policy since 1987 for the management of Lake Hayes, and it was ignored. There was another one done in 1995. It was ignored. If you had followed your policy, we would not have a problem with the lake now. ORC has failed the community because it has not followed its own policies. So I'm not disputing what framework you have to work within. The problem is that you haven't been working towards your objectives in any real tangible manner. And now the lake is polluted, and now you're asking us to pay. And we are the victims.
Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Kathleen. Listen, I'm wondering if you know in any ways that we are involved in work up the catchment. You've just said that we haven't been involved, and it's definitely a question for staff, and I hope that we will take that on board. But is there other work up the catchment that you think hasn't been done? And I note that you're upset that you see the polluters as being further up the catchment and not being caught in this. Am I correct in that?
To a certain extent, yes.
Yeah, and do we do any work up the catchment in terms of consents or anything else?
Well, you tell me, because Winton Developments year before last put an application in to, I think, or maybe 3 years ago, put an application in to completely move Mill Creek, change its direction, rebed it, put ponds off it, and it was just rubber stamped. And your management actually admitted that it was a failing on ORC's behalf. It just seemed that even though the senior management at ORC had agreed that they would be making sure consents weren't granted that would affect Mill Creek, they still granted them because the management didn't seem to know what was happening in the lower area. Now, I'm sure there are areas in the catchment where ORC has done work, but I think that'd be probably more in your knowledge. I'm more aware of the areas where they've failed, and I'm sure they have been involved in some consent process, but yet Millbrook seems to get extension after extension of golf courses. And ORC hasn't taken into account how that will affect the lake. In fact, ORC seemed to think until 2 years ago that the lake was improving, but yet hadn't done the science to discover that it wasn't, and wouldn't seem to take on board that everybody else that lived around the lake could see that it was failing and that there was more algal blooms. I think the science that ORC have used has been flawed, and that it doesn't test for sedimentation during storm events. It only tests at normal sunny days. And it is a scientific fact that 90% of the damage caused to lakes and Lake Hayes happens in storm events. So Friends of Lake Hayes have been able to get out and measure sedimentation in storm events. And to be honest, they have worked with ORC on some of that research. But really, it should have happened a long time ago.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions?
Logical hitch. Are you there, Kathleen?
Hi.
Have you got me now?
Yes. Yes.
Look, thank you very much indeed for your passion and for your submission, and we are certainly listening. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If anyone knows how to get that case,
yeah, I'll see those.
Just understand that.
Just because we don't.
Which one?
Doesn't mean that they're planned.
QLBC.
From a regulatory.
So that's what she's referring to.
Is that the number?
Yeah, I've got the number. I can't search it online. I've tried.
I tried to say.
Right, so our next submitter is the Lawrence Community Wetlands Project. And we've got Gay Cowie. Good morning, Gay.
Good morning. Hello.
Good. Gay, we've got sort of 6 or 7 minutes for you to have a chat to us, and then we'll ask you some questions. We'll give you a wee buzzer getting closer to that time frame.
No, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Gay Cowie. I'm a farmer at Typical West in Lawrence, and I'm also a partner at Shan Thompson Accountants in Balclutha. I represent a group called the Lawrence Community Wetlands Project. This group in some form has been around since 2015 when a working party of interested locals got together about this project. And in 2019, where we formed a group of people that were prepared to put their hand up and be trustees. As yet, we haven't formed trust because we're waiting to see if this project is going to get off the ground. So that's a little bit of backstory. So our proposal is to create a community wetlands on a 6-acre block of land owned by the Clutha District Council on the boundary of the Lawrence Township. The land is located between the Clutha Gold Cycle Trail Car Park and the Lawrence Chinese Camp, and it boundaries State Highway 8 in Bellevue Wetlands. Bellevue Wetlands is a privately owned by Stevie Robertson. It's a wetlands that Stevie's developed over the past 20 years, and it's something we'd like to recreate on our patch of land. So if you drive past this paddock and you take note, it's a wet paddock. It's a wet paddock that really wants to return to be a wetlands. It's full of rushes and it's often full of water. So not really productive farmland, and would be great as a wetlands. So the aim of our project in creating a community wetlands is to enhance and protect the biodiversity of the local area, to provide an environment for endangered native fish and birds, to educate the public about biodiversity, to preserve the local history of the site, to enhance the recreational value for residents, and to enhance the entranceway to Lawrence Township. We see there's a huge benefit that this paddock is on State Highway 8, and so any traffic passing from Dunedin to Central Otago will see what's happening in this paddock. And we think that people will stop and wander around and watch the wetlands develop over time. So huge benefits from being so visible to the community. We met with staff from the Regional Council last February, and we received positive feedback from them about what we wanted to do. So it's really about what's stopping this project going ahead. And as you can imagine, the resource consent costs and the required report fees, it's the paperwork that's all a bit scary. We went out for expressions of interest for a project manager in August last year and got 3 interested parties. And one of those parties estimated that it could be up to $80,000 in site surveys, architecture fees and easements for conveyance of water, hydrology and ecology reports, and the resource consent fee. And that figure's kind of a bit daunting to us. We're a group that we don't have a bank account. We don't have a cent in the bank account at the moment. So that's a bit scary. The physical work, look, I could have a man on a digger tomorrow. You know, we've got locals that want to get in and get this project started. I could have men on spades tomorrow doing it, but it's the paperwork side that's holding this project. We'd also have the support of the school. So at the moment, the school kids spend a day a year at Bellevue helping Stevie plant his wetlands. And we see we'd want to involve the school kids from day one with this project, that they can be involved in the planning, the planting, and watch this wetlands develop. So I'm here today to ask the support of the Regional Council to develop this project. And that's really with some of the reports required in the resource consent fees. We see there's huge benefits to the community and the wider public. They'll be able to see a wetland develop over time. It would be available for educational purposes, school visits. It would be an outside classroom. And an example and encouragement to public and private landowners to develop their own wetlands, as we all know how important wetlands are to our environment. So in summary, I just think this project's got real merit, and we're asking for the support for the Regional Council to get it off the ground. So thank you.
You talk about men and being the ones on the shovels and the diggers and not the women, but that's okay. Just want to understand, you talked about 80,000. Have you looked at Eco Fund or any other partnerships for getting that funding, or are you just, or is it that you just don't want to have to form another trust and have those operational costs in order to do those things, because those in themselves are hurdles?
Kate, we haven't applied for any other funds, but we certainly will. I guess you're my first stop on that part.
Okay, and so, well, congratulations to that gentleman who has done the planting, because it is absolutely fabulous down there, having cycled past it. It's a brilliant start.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hi, Gay. I suspect you used to know my mum. But anyway, if this council was to set up like a contestable fund, 50 grand for community wetland projects to waive or subsidise consent fees, could that be of benefit if that was ever to happen?
It would be a huge benefit to us. when we're faced with it, that this project might cost $500,000 or something, we just don't know where to start. You know what I mean? So yeah, huge benefit. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions?
Well done.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, and thanks for your very good work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are you placed now? We'll just. Oh, Luke is here. Oh, awesome. We'll just.
Sorry.
Page 56 for our next.
Thanks, Luke. This is for this.
How are you?
Good day. It's all right. Good day. But I will take that. Cheers. Look, one moment. We're just flicking to the right page.
I was going to ask you what procedure is here.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
2 minutes of Uber.
And you have effectively a copy of my submission, or
Yes. Yeah.
or got that? That's fine.
Thank you, Luke.
Click on book 2, page 56.
Yeah, book 2. So that's 18.
Yep. Good morning, Luke, and thanks very much indeed for coming along today, and thanks very much for taking the time to be part of the submission process. So we'll give you about 4 minutes, and then another one at 5 minutes, and that will give us sort of 4 or 5 minutes to ask questions of you, if that would suit. You can take all your submission as being read, and we have a copy of that in front of us. So thanks very much. The floor's yours.
Righto, no, that's fine, thank you. So yeah, I'm Luke Kane, farmer from West Otago, 4th generation farmer. I'm here representing a group of farmers that live along the Pomahaka corridor. Over time, we have become frustrated, I guess you'd say at best, with the management of the river and how it's being handled at the moment. So I've actually got a couple of photos here that I can show you. Whether they can pass around the room is the easiest. And they give an indication. So our main problem at the moment is we're battling lots of sediment loss or bank erosion into the river, and that actually there shows quite well. We had 3 councillors on farm 3 weeks ago, and we've actually just lost another 3 metres of bank. So roughly anywhere between 30 to 40 truckloads of sediment just gone into the river. We are finding that a lot of our sediment in the waterway is being blamed or pinpointed to other farming management, but we are, consistently getting some understanding of where this is actually going. There's a lot of mapping done at the moment of the depth of the waterway, but no real indication of the width of where the waterway shifts to. Some of these photos show a good 50 metres of how the river's deviated over the last 4 years. So we're asking for more indication of where and how the money will be spent, and some requesting some, I guess you call it KPIs on that, because we're starting to get a waterway has really good water quality, but it's becoming unsafe and unusable for recreational users. Likes of this meeting, we don't benefit financially from this. This is purely a goodwill thing. We're trying to get more fishermen and more people using the waterway. That first photo that's passed around, that's an area that the family, we mow and keep maintained as a fishing area. Our fences are set back 50 metres there, purely for access. But as you can see from that photo, it's very unsafe for any users, either swimmers or fishermen, to gain access to that waterway. So trying to highlight that fact. As far as the gravel part goes, we're working with ORC and councillors and have an understanding that they are going to start a global consent for the Pomahaka, which we applaud. We think that's a great idea, which hopefully will see the consent of 5 to 10 years to manage some of these areas and manage the waterway. We'd like to see that consent for the gravel be managed with the council and with our water care groups. So it's not given to a corporate to gain money out of that gravel extraction. We purely just want to see it managed and managed well. We think it can be done at a cost neutral basis. So if areas are identified year on year that need to be managed, they can be done by a local group of farmers or community, and the gravel can be dispersed where it needs to be, whether it going to local hospital builds, roading, whatever sees fit. But yeah, the main goal would be a cost neutral basis and to have a lot of community input of how that is managed. But yes, the willows, as you can see in the top of that first photo, we now have an ageing population of trees along our waterway. We're certainly not against trees on waterways. They just need managed. That main photo there's actually a dam of about half a dozen trees blocking the river at the moment, which is causing a lot of that erosion. So it's, that's kind of what we're after.
Councillor Scott.
I'm hoping with this global consent that a lot of these issues will be addressed as part of the consent and will go away. Am I dreaming?
As far as the gravel goes, we're hoping that is true, but obviously these consents take quite some time, so there is going to be an interim time of 18 months here with that will need some short-term action as well. But we would be in agreement that we seem to have the same mapping areas that we as farmers and locals have an understanding of where needs work, and so does the council. But we just obviously need to actually do something with that information.
Councillor Wilson.
Just for clarity, the trees that you want managed are actually ORC trees?
Yes, so our understanding is on the waterway is the trees are actually a council asset. So we as farmers would be quite happy to manage them, but they're not our assets, so we don't see why we should. At our rough figures, so we have over 10 kilometres of river boundary personally, and we estimate around $7,000 per kilometre is required for tree and gravel management in the very short term. So I'd hate to think what that costs over the whole waterway.
Councillor Decker.
Luke, thanks for being so clear about this and for the photographs, very helpful. Is this happening further north up the catchment?
Yes, it happens the whole way up. So McIntosh's Hole is a very well-known local swimming hole, or was. It no longer exists. So that second photograph I sent round, the scale of that is 3 times that, and the Camperdown Bend is another one. That's gone close on 80 metres into a farm over the course of time, and it stretches nearly 1 kilometre long.
Okay. And Luke, is this mainly flood event caused, or is it happening all the time?
Well, I was thinking yes, but then with the 3-week line on there, we've had 48 mils of rain in the last 3 weeks. We have not had a flood. No. So that's just happening daily.
Okay.
That's a note.
Thanks, Luke. Are you aware of any scientific data that has been produced regarding siltation of the river and ecosystem health? Is there? It's a question probably for our science team, but are you aware of any of that sort of information floating around?
No, our gut feeling is it seems really, really backwards. We can understand that we don't want to be in the water disturbing it, but then to have that amount of sediment fall in the water in a 3-week period anyway, that's more than likely more than what we would ever do to manage it. It seems really backwards to us. But no, not aware of that as to,
Councillor Calvert.
There's a lot of talk, and our emphasis must be from central government, the water, the river. Is this sort of wanting to keep the river at a particular sort of flow, or is it to return it to a previous, is it meddling with the future, or is it trying to return it to the past? What's the sort of underlying
We understand, like we've been on our farm for over 90 years, we understand the river is going to move to a degree. The degree that it moves in the last 10 years seems to be completely away from its natural path. And it's just small issues. We would like to see it working with nature effectively. We don't want to control it. We don't want to put concrete barriers down. You know, we certainly do not want to do that. We don't want to introduce anything that is not already in the water system. We're not a huge fan of introducing rock walls and that sort of mentality. But we need to work together with nature to get it managed, and so we're not losing this sediment or soil.
So you're trying to sort of moderate the effects of nature, perhaps a wee bit, or to keep it somewhat.
Yes, I guess you would say the big one with the trees causing some of this issue is, of course, riparian fencing is roughly 10 years old in a lot of the waterway. So a lot of the juvenile trees haven't been managed where they would have been in the past. So they are coming of age where they're causing some issues that aren't in the natural process, you'd say.
And in fact, that planting was meddling with the river on its own.
They're not planted. These grow like Wilding pines grow. These crack willows, they'll bloom out of nothing, and they'll put a root down and they'll just go. Yeah.
Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Luke. I'm just wanting to clarify. We own the asset, which is the willows. Now, do you want them removed or do you want them chopped? Just so everyone else gets an understanding of what your request is from us, please.
We certainly don't want to see all trees removed. That's not something that actually helps us in any means. Whether there's a better variety of tree and whether they're slowly changed to that, but clear felling the whole waterway is not something we see as a smart solution. They certainly need trimmed. Say, like some of those trees are 60 years old in that photo and they're falling in. There's roughly 1 in 6 of those trees is falling in. So, that's a lot of timber. Yep. We live beside a state highway, and the last flood event we had, there was 3 days of contractors with diggers removing trees off the bridge.
Yes.
So it's compounding all the time.
Any further questions? Good. But thanks very much indeed. Much appreciated.
Not a worry.
Thank you.
I'll leave the photos if you want.
Thank you. Good.
That shows the other direction.
Can I ask a question?
Generation 0, which is page 303.
Can I ask?
I was going to say we're jumping along one on the schedule, the coastal community cycle position.
Just while they sit down, can I just ask? I'm finding it frustrating that we don't know where these people have come from because everything's been blanked off on our submissions online on Diligent. So if people are submitting on Lake Hayes and we don't know where they come from, it is really, really difficult. And equally, if we don't know what they're, for us to understand it, I don't understand why that has been holistically blacked out. And if we could get an understanding of that, the break would be great. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning.
Fabulous. Good, thank you.
Well, we're from Dunedin, we'll make that pretty clear.
You've got some couple of names? No, we haven't.
No, we haven't got names. So.
Good morning. Thanks very much indeed for coming along. Look, we'll give you a wee bell at about 7 minutes and another one at 8 minutes, and then that will give us a couple of minutes to have some question time. Don't feel that you need to use the whole 8 minutes, but that's certainly available to. And if you could just introduce yourselves and let us know your names, so would be great. So the floor is yours.
Kia ora. We're obviously from Generation 0. I'm not sure if you've got the submissions in front of you. I'm Adam, this is Finn. Finn's going to start off talking about stuff, and I'm going to go into some transport issues after that.
Yeah, kia ora. So just for that immediate context, Generation 0 is a youth-led climate action organisation. We try and mobilise New Zealanders to engage with decision-making and campaign for intergenerational climate justice. We campaign for smarter transport, livable cities and independence from fossil fuels by lobbying government, business and other actors to advance climate change plans. we're trying to be efficient with our time. We'll cut straight to the point. I think for the submission point relating to pests, we support option 1, funding option B. We believe in the work being done in a more immediate sense, and we do not agree with delaying potential work being done. For the budget, we support option 1. We would still, to the same point, for Lake Hayes, we're from Dunedin, but we support option 1. We'd like to see that the funding for the work is done probably more immediately within the Lake Hayes area. We think this is an interesting project, and we think it's a good idea to be working on this, and we see this as a real opportunity to kind of explore the idea of land use planning, urban development, and water quality. So we're actually kind of keeping an eye on this. We'd like to see this as an opportunity to apply some of the learnings here in the future. We envision Otago with wetlands, native planting, regenerative agriculture, for Otago to support clean waterways for all to enjoy. We hope that you consider the runoff related to land use planning and land use change as the root of water degradation, and that is evidenced by the staff's commentary on the Lake Hayes area, and we'd like to see that adjusted. Speaking broadly to the submission points on land, water, biodiversity, and air, we maintain the expectation that ORC meets its obligations for the monitoring and management of our natural resources. With that, we support all measures to ensure that the job is done effectively, consistently, and to a high standard, and supports all efforts to ensure work is not deferred. We have the opinion that this work must be done across all features of resource management, and that this work should always be planned for, resourced, and funded. We appreciate funding concerns, but the current suggestions that defer ratings increases to be picked up by the people inheriting possibly a political viability problem. This is not a new issue for us. Like, we're not taking it personally, but we'd just like to voice our concerns about deferrals being us picking up a potential bill in the future. Shifting over to Adam.
For transport. So the main thing I'm going to be talking about is the potential of reducing bus fares to $1. So we've met with a bunch of councillors about that, and I think there's a lot of evidence that reducing, extending the trial and reducing the bus fares to a flat fee of $1. We know you all know the benefits of lower fares, of more people are going to use the buses, more accessible, people will get around, more economic activity, all those things. And I think often the thing that we're told is about the fare box recovery ratio of 50%. Which some people don't even know is actually was scrapped 3 or 4 years ago by NZTA. So the fare box recovery ratio doesn't apply, and there's really no need to keep to this whole 50% thing where the NZTA has completely scrapped it. And of course, they don't talk about it all the time because they're going to have to fund more money if we don't talk about it all the time. But there's no reason, there's no need anymore, and we can finally break away from having to get 50% of the fares through the fare box. So there's a real opportunity to reduce the fares to $1. And you can, and obviously as part of that, you can seek funding from different groups. We've met with various of you already. There's potential funding. You could see if you get some funding from the DCC as part of that. But I think that, ultimately reducing bus fares to $1 would have a massive impact to Rossiter region. It's totally possible. It would increase it. You have more people. We know all the benefits of it that would have, and I think there's really broad public support for doing it as well. And it wouldn't, and it's really possible. Sort of got some little points as well about transport within that, which is about it's really important that we require livable wage for bus drivers in every unit contracted through the PTOM, so that we can have, we really value our bus drivers who do the awesome work of getting us around where we work and where we play and where we study. I think some other people as well have raised some issues about the Dunedin Public Hospital Dunedin Public Hospital transport services. So a lot of the bus services currently, they leave. The morning buses arrive after the morning shift starts, and the evening bus actually ceases before the afternoon shift ends at the hospital. So it's pretty crazy that most hospital staff aren't able to get to the hospital with our current bus system. So I think, and I'm sure other people will be submitting on this from the hospital, but it's really important that we have a bus system that's going to be able to get people to our public hospital in the city, and it's crazy that it doesn't at the moment. And the last thing is, I think my understanding is that the plan is to keep buying fossil fuel buses until 2025, so phasing them out until 2025, which is really not acceptable. We look at, the government has said that by 2035, all buses have to be electric. Fossil fuel buses have to be eliminated entirely. So it's really crazy to keep buying more fossil fuel buses, when we know that in roughly 12 years time, we're going to have to eliminate them entirely, so the lifespan's ridiculously short. So it's a real opportunity to keep only buying electric buses and making sure that we are building that future and not causing us problems down the road. And the last thing is that is the possibility of also reducing bus fares to be ideally free for community service card holders, or at least half price. And ideally even for students as well, for students. And we know that in Auckland, and I know this is partly an NZTA thing and something nationally, but, in Auckland, the government's doing a trial to reduce bus fares, to reduce bus fares. So they're reducing bus fares by 50%. In Auckland, for all people with community service card holders. And I think there's a real opportunity for OSC to lobby the government and say, hey, we need to be next in this trial, and also we need a national rollout as soon as possible. But it's a real opportunity to make sure that the people that are the most vulnerable in our society are able to, get around to where we work, learn and play. But ultimately, I think that all this stuff fits within if we do reduce fares to $1, and I think it's obviously a bold call, but I think there's really mass public support for it, and I'd love any questions about that in particular. I'm talking to people about, about where people might be prepared to support it and that sort of thing. But I think it's just a real awesome opportunity for Dunedin to really, to be a leader and to, help our people get around the city and really, fulfil that responsibility that I think the council has to the people. So, tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora. We'd love to hear any questions, unless you have something else.
I just want to tack on a little reminder there that we hope that OSC is looking forward to the climate change obligations at the end of this year in December, and that you are planning for the requirement for climate change within your planning functions, and that we look forward to being able to see them a bit more clearly and find a little bit more detail in the work you're doing. And we're happy to share some of our thoughts when those plans are coming out as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Finn. And questions, and Councillor Forbes, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Kia ora, Koro, and thank you for that. It's a great submission. There's a couple of questions I've got. First, I'll start with transport, since that's where we were. And transport, would you see reduced fares as funded by targeted rates? I know you mentioned DCC, but there's a whole lot that we actually have to do. So rates targeted to the towns where there is public transport, or would you see good public transport as having a more general benefit and the costs being spread?
I think if we take it from a variety of places. I think one of the places that it can be taken from is things like increased parking things, so that we're redirecting people towards public transport. So we want the incentive of having nice low bus fares, but also if I can drive to university and find a free parking space or a $1 our parking space, I'm probably going to do that. So I think we can fund it by reducing parking spaces and charging parking spaces higher, so to get those people onto the buses in those places. I think targeted rates can also be a solution as well, totally. But ultimately, I think that. I think the targeted rates can be a solution, but I also think that we also need to, think about where we're taking it from roads, how much we're spending on roads, how can we recoup that, and also get money from parking charges and those sort of things, and redirect that towards public transport.
Councillor Scott.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, one more. Sorry, Councillor Forbes.
I've got another one on another subject.
Yep.
Do you want to carry on with that?
Yeah, go. Yep.
Okay, the other one was, I was curious about your Lake Hayes support for option 1, given that, in the words of a previous submitter, that to take the money from the people that just live around the lake to fix the lake rewards the polluter, who won't be paying anything because they live outside of, the further up the catchment, so outside that rating zone. Would there not be better environmental results if the polluter had to pay rather than the victim? Because the people living around the lakes are victims. And I wondered how you thought that through to think that that one might be the right solution, even though it's our preferred option, or not mine. But.
I think that is a really good point. And I think when we were also talking about this and the relationship between land use planning, we found like the people who've already cashed in on their houses being sold in their area, there's nothing we can do for anyone like that. We were just trying to figure it out on balance, and we think there was some flexibility between the Queenstown Lakes area and the Lake Hayes comment, and Lake Hayes only and the Queenstown Lakes area. We were kind of toing and froing because of that exact comment there. Like we realized that in in many cases, whether or not where the rates were targeted, a lot of the people who had already benefited from this sort of action were long gone. So I think when we're having this discussion, this is why we think it's going to be a really interesting case study, that this is why we're looking at it quite interestingly, is because of the fact that people are able to make changes to the system, affect the water quality, affect the land quality, and then not really have to worry about the end effects.
And the question was quite specifically about, about should it be, the local people, or should it be the broader, populace, where ultimately, you're right, it should be the polluters paying separately, right? It shouldn't be every single household having to pay. It should be the polluters paying the people that are putting that into the river. So it is a polluter-pays principle. But of that question, we thought it should be that local thing.
I see. Thank you for that. But the polluters do live further up the catchment, not round the lake. But okay, thank you for those questions.
We've already, reduced the bus fares.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to look at the patronage data? Have you come to some conclusion that, in terms of, do you expect patronage to further increase with the dollar? Have you got your head around that, or do you just want a cheaper fare?
We've looked at it briefly, and you can see that obviously and there has been an effect on patronage, in reducing the fares. There's obviously other contexts as well that have gone on, but as reduced the fares, and you also it's really clear, across the world, across New Zealand, there's a lot of evidence that when you reduce fares, more people use them, more people go further. There's a lot of evidence to show that, I think, and there's other situations as well as what's going to happen in specifically, but that single policy will get more people on buses, and that's really well evidenced.
Just one quick one from Councillor Calvert.
Yeah. The people who you hope would more take buses, what are they doing now? You're suggesting, I think, that they might have been driving and parking in a cheap park, but the hierarchy is, of course, active transport, then public transport, then. So would the people who would be attracted, in your view, by cheaper buses who are students, for example, because it was students you were focusing on, what are they currently doing?
I think that, we're obviously focusing on everybody. I think that currently they're not going at all, right? So they're not going as far as they would go. So, for example, me, I might go to St Clair if there was a cheaper bus fare, and I know that a lot of us would go to St Clair, for example, if there's a cheaper bus fare. So they might already be driving. So some of them be driving, and some of them won't be going at all. So you're getting people to move around the city more and more and more, I think. What's the second part of the question? And I think that you're right. We need active transport, and we need both. We totally need lots of funding in active transport and active funding in bus. But I think that a lot of people who are going to be biking around anyway, I don't think that suddenly they're not going to bike. And as long as we have those bike racks on buses, which we do, which is amazing, people are going to bike and they're going to catch the bus, and they'll integrate these forms of transport. I think the more options we give people for clean transport, the better it is. It's not like we're going to, make busing cheaper, so they're going to stop running and they're going to not be fit anymore.
No, so they generally move around more.
Yeah, they move around more, which is awesome, I think, for Otago, yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Finn. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Oh yeah. Doing everything we can.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for your time. Have a good afternoon.
And we're on page 212
of the shorter book.
Page 212. We're heading to
Shorter book.
Good morning, Emily.
Us for their own words.
Good morning, Emily. We'll give you a wee buzzer at about 7 minutes and another one at 8 minutes, and that will give us a couple of minutes for question time.
Sure.
At the end of that. So
okay.
Feel free. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, kia ora koutou. So I'm Emily Cooper from Waikato, and I'm presenting here on behalf of the Coastal Community Cycle Connection Group, an independent group set up to kickstart a two-part cycleway to connect the communities of Waikawati Karatani and Warrington Waiteri. These cycleways will also become sections of a full Dunedin to Oamaru trail in the future. Dunedin to Waikawati would be a start. In my submission, I draw attention to the imbalance in the alternative transport options available to the North Coast communities as compared to those available to residents of other areas of Dunedin City, Otago Peninsula, for example. where the population there is roughly half that of the North Coast. If we enjoyed the same infrastructure as Peninsula residents, we could visit friends in the village next door without using a car, anytime we liked, even on the weekend. Our children could safely ride there. Tourists could cycle between Destination Dunedin star attractions like Orokonuri Eco Sanctuary, Ark Brewery or Karatani Māori tours on the Waikato River. This is the vision that we have for our communities, and it's actually a pretty basic one. Yeah, you could even go so far as to say it was our right as ratepayers to have access to car alternatives. The last time I spoke to full council, it was at the public forum prior to the Strategy and Planning Committee meeting in November 2020. Following that meeting, councillors voted in unanimous support for a proposed regional integrated cycleway network strategy and a motion for a workshop in the new year to explore options was moved with unanimous support. Buoyed by this enthusiasm, we also submitted to the draft Regional Land Transport Plan, and I spoke at the hearings in May this year asking for support of our project. I requested $50,000 funding from ORC for a track to be designed and for consents and easements put in place ahead of requesting contributions from funders for infrastructure. Please note that what we essentially want from ORC is seed funding. The community will take it from there. $50,000 for a project manager will give you a very good return on investment. To give you an idea, the Alps to Ocean annual associated spending by cyclists is about $27 million. The community outcomes achievable are many also. We can help you tick your boxes. This project will happen because the communities want it to, and because it aligns with central government's policies for safe land transport, better travel options and emissions reductions. Even the DCC have submitted to the long-term plan to encourage ORC to, quote, investigate and work with local authorities to open up areas where tracks and trails could be developed to link into a wider integrated active transport and recreation network for walking and cycling. We urge the ORC to uphold their commitment to promote sustainable, safe and inclusive transport by supporting our project fully and actively. Keep up the momentum. Has the workshop been held? We request that endorsement of the development of an integrated regional cycle trail network is included in the 10-year plan so that ORC may contribute to significant projects such as ours in the very near future. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Yes, there has been a workshop last week.
Right.
I understand. I regrettably could not attend it. Sorry. Just understanding the, although it would be a very good argument as to why those should now be public, as I'm sure people like you would have loved to have seen them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Taking on Councillor Calvert's mission at the moment. Just wanting to understand the route that you're proposing. And I know at once upon a time I did some work on this project and they talked about the Leith Valley Road and stuff like that.
Right.
You're talking about just connecting those communities initially at the north or all the way through?
If we had the funding, $50,000, then that would be enough to design a trail all the way.
Mm-hmm. And it's not all off-road or it would be? And
it would be mostly off-road. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is great for safety.
Have you got a proposed sort of idea of where you think you can go at the moment?
Well, yes, we do, sort of, but...
landowner, I appreciate landowner stuff.
Yeah, we have, there's been landowners have been spoken to, but in order to answer all those questions, like where is it going to go and what's it going to look like and what kind of surface is it going to have and all the rest of it, we actually do need funding for a project manager to design it, because right now it's all just sort of talking around in circles, really. Yeah, I'd love to be able to answer all those questions, but it's sort of chicken and egg.
Sounds exciting.
Councillor Newt.
Thanks, Emily. You don't see this track development as a an alternative to public transport, but you'll see it as complementary to. Is that
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Say there was a trail out to Waikato from Dunedin, then people could cycle out and then catch the bus back. I guess a little bit like happens around the peninsula. But it's, I guess, about providing, alternative transport options and providing those connections. Yeah, it's an integrated strategy is really what we're after. Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Deegar.
Yeah, just Emily, thank you. It's very good stuff. Talking public transport for a moment, am I right in assuming that you would like to see any extension evenings and weekends of the bus service through to Palmerston and back going through Warrington, or would you still want to go up State Highway 1 and back again?
I'm representing, I guess, this cycleway group. I think residents in Warrington would be quite happy to have a service at all running past Evansdale that they could use and utilise on the weekends and in the evenings. Currently there's nothing at all. So I think the question of whether it goes into Warrington is perhaps a moot point at the moment, because there is no bus service on the evenings and the weekends anyway. So, in fact, I have to say that bus service, I've lived in Waikato since I was born, apart from a stint in Dunedin, and the bus timetable is the same as it was when I was 14.
Yesterday.
It might seem quite recent, but it's actually 30 years ago.
Oh, you hide it well.
So, 30 years, the timetable is still the same. And then you couldn't get the bus into town, and you still can't get the bus into town on the weekend or on the evening.
Yep.
And the population is decent out there, and it's growing. So
thank you, Emily. Very much appreciated. Some thought-provoking thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we'll have on page 384, predator-free.
Come on. We haven't got your the black data contact details, so.
Even with the time.
Yeah. You moved to
You need to stop more often.
Quite right, Brian.
What a team.
I could tell you a story about that actually.
Not about your rugby playing days.
No.
I don't want to hear those again.
I'll show it to you actually.
Okay, mate.
It's really wonderful.
For dinner.
Cheers.
You good?
Sorry.
I turned up last
You certainly
night.
know how to pack your diary pretty full. Everyone, I mean.
Morning, Reece. Who are you? Value for money, perhaps?
So we'll give you a wee bow at about 7 minutes, and then another one at about 8 minutes, and then we will give you some questions if the councillors so require. So feel free. We've all read your submission. Take it as read, and the floor's yours, Reece.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to present today on behalf of Predator Free Dunedin and its 22 member organisational members. I'll refer to Predator Free Dunedin as PFD from here on in. Look, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the substantive contribution of financial support received to date from the ORC and also the 2019 RPMP, which sets such a strong foundation for pest control in our region. Both the RPMP and the Council's cornerstone funding of PFD have been essential in beginning a strategic and cohesive approach towards achieving the national vision to remove stoats, possums and rats from across this country by 2050. Despite the challenges of COVID, communities across Dunedin are leading trapping programs in their backyards and across inner city reserves. I wish to remind councillors that as communities take on trapping and predator control,
your operational budgets become available for Council to expand its work into additional areas. Community ownership of the cause is at the heart of this kaupapa and is fundamental to its sustainability and achievability. The Halo project, is one of the delivery partners, is seeing great progress with muster lid traps now in place across the full project area of 12,500 hectares from Aramoana to Waitati and back into Flagstaff. Last year, over 400 stoats were caught with help from hundreds of volunteers. This is significant, and I'll just remind you that it was just 2 stoats that wiped out the entire saddleback population within Orokonui just 3 years ago, so 400 stoats is a lot. The eradication of possums on the peninsula is progressing well. 20,000 possums have been removed and knockdown operations are now complete in 3 out of 5 sectors. Using eradication terminology, the mop-up in those 3 sectors now begins, targeting those surviving possums with remote sensor traps as well as heat sensing equipment and locator dogs. Concurrently, the knockdown operations begin across Sector 4 back towards town. The gains for our biodiversity are clear. In Dunedin, riflemen have been seen in Glenleith, New Zealand falcon is seen flying over North East Valley, and taonga species from Orokonui, such as the South Island robin, are increasing in numbers and expanding to find safe haven beyond the fence in forest habitat and increasing distances from the eco-sanctuary. And the benefits of predator control go beyond biodiversity. Community conservation creates healthy, resilient and more cohesive communities. One example was seen recently on Māori Hill, where 3 neighbouring families previously unknown to one another are now working together to get rid of the possums targeting their gardens, and with great success. With reference to the RPMP and the LTP, Osprey have been undertaking intensive possum control in the West Harbour Mount Cargill area since 2015, as you know, due to a TB outbreak. This has been supported by the Halo project as a delivery partner of PFD. The ORC added the West Harbour Mount Cargill area as a site-led program in the recent RPMP. This requires that the possum population be maintained at less than 2% RTCI. 2% is a low possum population and is in stark contrast to the extremely high population that was resident 4 years ago. The biosecurity strategy requires a progressive containment of possums to achieve that. The RPMP states that ORC will take a lead role in facilitating this. To ensure this target can be met, a succession plan for Osprey's possum control operations has been developed. This plan was developed by senior staff from key parties such as DOC, Osprey, DCC, PFD and the ORC. Operational costs for the implementation of the succession plan include contributions from PFD and Osprey, with the cost of predator control across City Council's land being budgeted for within their long-term plan. The ORC's proposed biosecurity budget within this LTP has been based on the estimated cost of operations across the remaining private landowner area based on possum habitat. We are encouraged by the proposed increase in funding for biosecurity and biodiversity. It's absolutely essential to ensuring Council can meet its obligations. It also takes advantage of our current opportunity to expand and accelerate predator control across Dunedin. As part of the government's COVID-19 recovery fund, 3.5 million has been ring-fenced to expand our work if we are able to provide one-to-one co-funding. This would also see more than 20 jobs created. It would allow stoat control across the entire Otago Peninsula, a major boost for what should be called the seabird capital of the world, tying in with proposed facilitated rabbit control by the ORC. This means further protection for threatened and vulnerable taonga species and the potential reintroduction of species. Possum populations would also be reduced from 2% to zero density across more than 10,000 hectares of the West Harbour Mount Cargill area surrounding Orokonui. This is the next step towards eradication. We would also extend the succession plan from Osprey to include another 30,000 hectares of mixed private, recreational and conservation land cherished by many. This would include iconic landscapes such as Flagstaff, Swampy Summit, Silver Peaks and Silver Stream. As per our current operating model, we plan to succeed Osprey in managing and driving lower possum numbers. Osprey are beginning operations now in this expansion area and are due to conclude operations within 3 years. Unless there is a TB outbreak, they will not return. We're working with corporate landowners who are contributing financially towards predator control on their own estates and on public land within the expansion area. This expansion opportunity links directly with the RPMP and the biosecurity strategy. The biosecurity strategy requires that the ORC will, within 18 months of adoption, develop a possum control program focusing on osprey completed areas for long-term bovine TB eradication and biodiversity gains. PFD has a strong plan to do this. We have the support of our 22 member organisations, which of course includes the ORC as a core partner. We have ring-fence government funding of $3.5 million to deliver it, but we need the political and financial support from our partners to make this happen. Now, of course, we need that commitment stated in quick time as per normal predator-free process within a month from now. Overall, predator-free encourages the ORC to further its commitment to the predator-free movement by delivering on the stated actions within the RPMP and associated strategy. We applaud the ORC for its focus on pest control in this long-term plan. We support option 1, being an immediate and significant increase in capacity and capability to manage pests. This option is aligned with the rate of change and acceleration of pest management which we need. It's aligned with the urgency required to deal with pest threats and is aligned with the current and very unique opportunity from PF 2050 Limited to accelerate and expand our work. This opportunity arose as a response to COVID and is one that as a region we must grab. If the ORC is to achieve the outcome stated in the RPMP, delaying action or resourcing will not suffice. Overall, you'll see that PFD is a well-supported community-driven vision supported by 22 organisations. We have strong support for our submission from these members and remind you that the ORC is core to our success as a key funder, regulator and a leader. Thank you.
Very much, Reece. Any quick, Councillor Calvert?
I've seen different things and I'm obviously just confused myself about them. Is the funding we've been given to you essentially a contract, or is it, as it were, a grant? I've just seen it mentioned sometimes that we've got a contract with you for X period of time or for X outcomes or something. So I'm just.
So it's initially it was a grant for the first 5 years of operations. So with the initial predator-free contract with PF 2050 Limited, we needed 2-for-1 co-funding. So the ORC is a co-funder of that initial contract. Predator-free Dunedin holds a contract with Predator-free 2050 Limited to deliver certain outcomes, such as eradication of possums on the Otago Peninsula. The ORC's contribution to that is as a grant.
So we don't have a contract with you, but there are arrangements between those.
Yeah, that's
right.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, 2 quick ones. So the 5-year granted contract, where are we in the time frame for that?
So that runs through till mid-23.
Mid-23.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're now proposing to expand spatially, but also out to 2025.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, your main focus, my understanding, is the Greater Dunedin area. We're also getting, interest, for example, the Queenstown Sanctuary and all that. Have you got any feedback to us? Because you're our main, we'll sort of put all our eggs in one basket to a certain degree. How do we transition regionally? Like, is there potential central government funding? I mean, you're in the game. What's your advice to us?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of momentum and there's now 20 projects funded nationally. So we were part of the original 5. And there's certainly, I was at a hui last week and there's, we have a project in Southland underway. There's one, the Runanga are likely to get one underway around Hokanui. Banks Peninsula is now funded.
Yeah.
And it'd be great if Wakatipu area came on too, but and also Lower West Coast has been fully funded for a large predator eradication project with the West Coast councils.
Mainly through central government, is it? Or?
It's always co-funded. It's this type of regime. So a whole lot of us were subject to that 2-for-1 co-funding. So every $1 central government put in, we had to put in 2.
Yeah.
post-COVID, or as a COVID, part of the COVID recovery response, it shifted to 1-to-1. Okay, so for every dollar government put in, it's reduced for us to put in $1 rather than 2. And this expansion that we're talking about now is under that regime. So, yeah, it was great. Look, there's a lot of discussion about how we connect up these projects, and also with regard to possums, how Osprey Connect is the glue for that succession for community projects filling out. We'd love to join up with the Wakatipu, Banks Peninsula, to the south, programs in the Catlins and Southland. I guess it's just these are seen as the pilot projects, and over time we'll join up.
One quick one, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, 2. That's okay. I'll try and roll them into one. The option 1, which is you're supporting, is because that has that funding and therefore you for the 1-for-1.
Correct.
And then there's a whole lot of submissions saying that the land value one is only fair because the people with the biggest land should be paying for this. What is the contribution that Osprey have been putting into this? Because Osprey is farmer. I mean, they pay through their.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't understand there's a rating system for farmers for pest control or animal health control. What has their contribution been like towards your project?
To date, their contribution has probably been about 1/3 of predator-free Dunedin.
Right.
So it provides the basis, and with the expansion it'll be the same. They inject millions for that knockdown.
Yeah, okay.
And we're there to come in behind them.
Thank you.
And it's just the key point is in the absence of us being there to, us, the collective, being there to come in behind them, there is no other real plan. So it's a bit of a golden opportunity.
Thank you very much, Reece, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
For anyone who got their email to go to a meeting on Wednesday the 20th, it's on Thursday the 20th. Just saying, tonight at 5:30.
Andy Barrett, which is page 112 of book 2.
It doesn't have the co-funding for the government. That means that they won't get the 3.5 million. I think that's how it works, but ask Andrew.
Yeah, because option 2 was recommended.
Good morning, Andy, and thanks very much for taking the time to come and talk to us. We give you about 4 minutes, and then we'll hopefully wrap up another about 5 minutes, and that gives us some time to ask you some questions. So thanks very much.
Fine.
The floor is yours.
Is this
it's all go.
Microphone's on?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Andy.
I'll try to take less time than that, actually. I've just prepared a very brief statement, which I'll read, and you'll be pleased to hear I'm not asking you for any money. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. And let me just introduce myself. My name's Andy Barrett. My wife and I live on a 17-hectare rural block on Apes Road, Merton, just to the south of Karitani. Over the last 28 years, we've planted many thousands of trees for timber, shelter and amenity. We have several hundred fruit and nut trees and a small market garden, which helps supplement our income now that we're both retired. Apart from working on our property, I've been an active member of many community groups and organisations. That said, I'd want to stress that the submission that you have before you is made in my own name and not on behalf of any group that I belong to. And I should also add that I have no academic or professional qualifications to add any weight to what I've written. And as I looked over my submission yesterday, I felt that I should apologise if it seems somewhat impertinent, because it looks as though I'm actually wanting to tell you how to do your job.
Feel free.
Sure, it won't be the first time. And it may well be that you're already doing at least some of the things that I mention, or have them in hand, and please forgive me if that's the case. Time's short. I was reminded of this in an email yesterday, so I'll just simply restate my main points. First of all, I support the proposed increases to the rates. I think it's high time that the Regional Council have more money to do the work that it needs to do. One of my main concerns is that as more money comes into the council, that new staffing in particular should prioritise the work of frontline field staff. I also believe that regional council work on the ground should be as much about education and support as it is about enforcing compliance. I also would ask the regional council to consider whatever ways it can to collaborate with other bodies, including other regional councils, to minimise the duplication of resources and effort. I think that in working with our farmers, the creation of really good and wide-ranging individual farm plans is absolutely essential for success. I also have a strong belief that trees and farm wastes are things which need particular consideration in the coming years. And finally, what I would like to see is the Regional Council looking at ways of rewarding farmers who are doing good things, not just being seen to be punishing those that are doing bad things. Thank you very much for your attention.
Any questions? Councillor Deco.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. That's a very good submission. Just on your last point there, how do you think it would be effective for us to reward well-behaved farmers?
Well, I think one way that it could be done is through press releases. I think it's a very simple way now of getting good news stories out into the community. So that is one way of doing it. You could even consider creating particular awards that you want, where you identify farmers who you feel have done particularly well in converting their farms in ways which are actually more environmentally satisfactory, but also, and I think that this is the key to it in terms of working with farmers, is actually showing that this doesn't necessarily have an impact on farm productivity or profitability.
We used to do exactly that, and I'm not sure why we don't anymore. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Calvert.
I'm just wanting to commend you on your uplifting presentation, because we sometimes forget that we're not, although we are a regulatory body, we've been set up to be, we can achieve those results at the front end if possible, and I really commend you for reminding us of that other part of ourselves.
Thank you. I would just like to add that it seems to me, and it will be obvious to you, that I think our farmers at the moment are feeling under an enormous amount of pressure. And while I very much want to see strong environmental outcomes as quickly as possible, I think we've got to be able to bring farmers along with us. And I think that there are many ways that we can actually do that.
Well said.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much for taking the time. Next, we will have on page 166, I think it is. Are we
169.
Oh, I've already gone into another page. Right. Forest and Bird. Thanks, Andy. Okay. Morning, Rick.
Morning.
So, Rick, we'll give you a wee buzz at about beep at about 7 minutes, and with another one at 8 minutes if that's required, and then we can have some question time. So, the floor is yours, sir.
Right, thank you. Thanks for your time today. I'm Brett Zwan, the Regional Conservation Manager for Forest and Bird, covering Otago and Southland. So yeah, thanks for your guys' time today, and I also just want to thank all the council staff who, did all the work putting together these consultation documents and have the job of implementing them as well. I often feel like staff don't get the recognition that they deserve some of the time. So this submission is on behalf of the National Office and the several branches that we've got throughout the region in Dunedin, South Otago, Central Otago Lakes, and Waitaki as well. So Forest and Bird has had a long presence in the area. We undertake significant work on the ground through projects as well as doing regional advocacy. We look after several reserves, and we also participate quite actively in the regional council, district council planning processes and whatnot, with the purpose of doing all we can to look after and protect nature. And it is really good to see the council is increasing the funding in these priority areas, and that is desperately needed in the light of the biodiversity crisis that we're facing and the climate crisis that we're facing. So I do want to commend and thank the council for increasing the investment in land and water and in biodiversity and biosecurity control. For a long time, I think these areas have been severely lacking in the region. So yeah, I want to try and come with a constructive, positive stance today, and thanks for the work in that area. So in terms of the specifics, when it comes to the managing pests proposals, we're supportive of option 1, and I think predator-free Dunedin have probably outlined it much more articulately than I can of the reasons why that's needed. And I would even say you could go beyond that level of funding as well. There's no shortage of pests to control in the region, and there's a lot more work that could be done. So strongly supportive of that. And also keen to ensure that when we're looking at pest control, we're looking at some of the ungulate species as well, such as deer and goats and whatnot, that cause significant damage to the understory of bush. So in terms of the rehabilitating Lake Hayes aspect, you guys may have read in the paper what our position on this is. I think it is really good to see the council is wanting to prioritise cleaning up our lakes. There are several lakes that are in a degraded position. Lake Hayes is, a significant one. And one of the core concerns that we had with the proposals in the long-term plan was the focus on the beneficiary pays principle versus the polluter pays principle. And we would be quite concerned of the precedent that it would set if we focused on the beneficiary pays proposal for a problem that has been clearly created by pollution. So in terms of that proposal, we would suggest the upper catchment, or the catchment of landholders flowing into the lake should be where the primary cost lies, noting that that pollution has been created for well over 80 years. But in terms of how do you address that in the historical accountability, one of the ways in which you can do that is reflected in the increased land values that those parcels of land would have. So we would be supportive of modifying that option to ensure that that entire upper catchment, the entire catchment is responsible for it, and not necessarily those who are below the lake. I had a call from someone who lived in the Shotover development area there on the confluence, and who seemed to be confused that we were suggesting that they should be paying for it, and I took a while to explain that no, that was the kind of opposite of what we were proposing, and that it should be those landholders who have in the past contributed and continue to contribute to it. It's also important when we can pour as much funding as we like into cleaning up our lakes and rivers, and we should be doing that, but we should also be looking at addressing the root causes of that pollution, and that's where I think the investment that the council is putting in towards improving the plans and the significant amount of work that's needed in that area is highlighted by the Professor Skelton report and has been shown throughout the PC7 court process that's on at the moment, is really needed to ensure that we continue to reduce the pollution going into the streams and rivers and look at the root causes of these problems rather than just trying to put a dressing over the wound once it's there. And on that note, it is really good to see the council investing in the science and monitoring aspects. That's really good, and great to see the increase in the science team that has already happened and is proposed to continue to happen over this. I would also encourage, when we're doing the science and monitoring, to as much as possible make all of that information and data as publicly and easily accessible as possible so everyone can see it. I know the council's invested quite a lot, for example, in looking at what the original land cover would have been throughout the region, or as best as we know it, and what the current land cover is. That type of stuff is really rich information and can help landholders know what to be planting on their places, or if you're doing a restoration project, what to look for, or the areas of significant areas as well. So having that information available on GIS maps is a really worthwhile investment as well. And in terms of the wider biodiversity thing, it is good that the council does have the Eco Fund. Again, I think this is an area that you could really increase the amount that you're putting towards it. And noting that successive long-term plans have identified these areas, and it's high time to get on and actually make sure action's happening on the ground. We were somewhat, I guess, disappointed to see the funding for the air quality reduce in the short term, and this would be an area that I think always needs sustained investment. And we've already seen the national air quality standards in exceedance already this year, so it is something that we are going to need to put a lot of funding and resources and thinking towards. And I kind of can understand where the council's coming from, but we wouldn't want to see this being used to not ensure that that medium long-term focus doesn't remain on improving the air quality throughout the region. Finally, in terms of the acting on a climate emergency, it is really good to see the council investing in the likes of public transport, and we would encourage the council to do all it can to see how you can expand public transport in areas that are currently underserved or not served at all, and seeing how we can improve the intercity connections through public transport and also electric cars and bikes and whatnot as well. So I'll leave it there, but finally, the really important focus on compliance monitoring and enforcement, because all of the rules and things that we put in place and spend oodles of time doing don't really mean much unless we're adequately ensuring that those rules are enforced. And I think most people would agree with that, especially those who are putting the effort into following the rules as well. So thank you for your time today.
Questions? Don't take that as not listening, sir.
It's clear.
Very full, very thorough, and we very much appreciate the work you're doing.
All right. Thanks a lot, councillors.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Thank you. Just before we do adjourn, I just our second submitter, Brian Boyle, we had the audio malfunction. That if you did have a question, if you could send it through to Jasmine now or on the chat box, and we'll get those through to Brian just as soon as we could.
Got one.
You've got one, and you'll pass it on.
Yep.
The process. So I have still got that question, if we can get a response, but about why all of the contact details have been blacked out from ours, so that we can't see if the people were submitted from Lake Hayes or not, or where they're from.
It's public document, so we've redacted those from all of them.
Have they asked for that? Because it makes it meaningless if we don't know where they've come from, their submission.
I think it's ORC. I think it's an ORC policy. Anyone who submits, we don't share that.
But diligent isn't public.
Thank you. Yep.